The South African National Defence Force, or SANDF, stands today as a shadow of its former self. Its predecessor, the SADF, was once a powerful, technologically advanced military, projecting power across southern Africa and enforcing apartheid policies. The SADF's legacy is both a source of pride and pain, deeply tied to the country's turbulent past. In 1994, democracy brought the SANDF, a merger of the SADF, Liberation Movement Forces, and homeland militaries. This integration symbolized a new, unified South Africa, aiming for a military that served all its people. The vision was a professional, respected force reflecting the nation's diversity. But over the years, that promise has faded. The SANDF now faces a crisis. Declining budgets, political neglect, and mismanagement have eroded its capabilities. Once a regional powerhouse, it now struggles to fulfill basic mandates: border defense, police support, and peacekeeping. The gap between expectations and reality has grown dangerously wide. The decline is systemic, affecting every aspect of the organization. Aging equipment, skills shortages, and plummeting morale threaten both national security and South Africa's regional standing. The journey from feared military power to struggling force is a cautionary tale. It highlights the consequences of sustained neglect and the difficulty of maintaining a modern military without consistent support. Understanding the SANDF's current state means reckoning with its dramatic fall from strength. In the late 1980s, the SADF reached its peak, forged by decades of investment and combat in Angola and Namibia. The SADF developed unique tactics and equipment, excelling in mobile warfare and deep penetration raids. Armscor, the state armaments corporation, produced world-class artillery, tanks, and helicopters, giving the SADF a technological edge. The Battle of Cuito-Cuanavale showcased the SADF's ability to halt major offensives and project power far from home. Yet, this military strength was inseparable from apartheid, serving to maintain white minority rule. The SADF's prowess was built on a foundation of racial segregation and political oppression. The end of apartheid and the transition to democracy fundamentally changed the military's purpose and structure. The formidable force of the 1980s was a product of conflict, isolation, and a state determined to survive at any cost. As democracy dawned, the military's mission shifted from enforcing apartheid to defending a new, inclusive order. The legacy of that era still shapes perceptions of the SANDF today. The transformation was as much about redefining values as it was about changing tactics. The birth of the SANDF in 1994 marked a profound shift, no longer defending apartheid but a new democracy. The force's doctrine, training, and culture had to be completely reoriented. Integration merged former enemies, SADF, MK, APLA, and Homeland Forces, creating a single national army. This was a political success, but it left scars: mistrust, disputes over rank, and a loss of experienced personnel. As external threats faded, so did political will and funding for a large military. Budgets shifted to address socio-economic inequalities, and the defense budget began a steep decline. The SANDF was tasked with more roles: border protection, disaster relief, while resources shrank. This mismatch between responsibilities and funding only worsened. The 1998 Defense Review envisioned a smaller, more advanced force and led to the controversial arms deal. New jets, helicopters, submarines, and corvettes were purchased, but corruption plagued the process. The arms deal consumed the budget, leaving little for operations, maintenance, or retaining skilled personnel. The SANDF's transformation was ambitious, but underfunding and mismanagement undermined its goals. The result, a force stretched thin, struggling to meet its mandate. Today, the SANDF faces critical decline: aging, unserviceable equipment, and a severe skills shortage. Gripen jets and Navy vessels are often grounded. The Army's vehicles are obsolete. Experienced personnel leave for better opportunities, and training standards have plummeted. Pilots, sailors, and soldiers lack the hours and exercises needed to maintain proficiency. On paper, the SANDF looks impressive. In reality, it struggles to execute missions. Morale is at a low ebb: poor pay, broken equipment, and limited advancement fuel disillusionment. Reports highlight poor living conditions and lack of support for service members. Leadership faces criticism for political interference and a focus on representativity over competence. The transformation of the military's demographic profile was necessary, but sometimes came at the cost of meritocracy. Without strong, capable leadership, the SANDF cannot address its deep-seated problems. Budget cuts, equipment failure, and low morale are crippling the force. The SANDF risks becoming little more than a jobs program losing its professional edge. The decline is now a threat to both national security and the institution's future. The SANDF's decline is written in its budget. Defense spending has dropped from over 4% of GDP in the 1980s to less than 1% today. Chronic underfunding is the root cause of most problems. The 2022-23 budget, 49 billion rand, with over 60% spent on personnel, leaving little for operations or new equipment. The Army's Ratel vehicles and Air Force's C-130S are decades old, with no replacements in sight. Operational funding is so low that pilots get less than a quarter of the flying hours needed for proficiency. The Navy's ships and submarines are often confined to port. The Army can't afford large-scale exercises. Skills atrophy and combat effectiveness decline as activity drops. The Department of Defense warns that current funding is unsustainable and core capabilities are being lost. The chief of the SANDF has called the situation critical, warning of an irreversible downward trajectory. The numbers are clear. The SANDF is being systematically defunded into obsolescence. Without urgent intervention, the force will soon be unable to fulfill its constitutional mandate. The consequences are stark. South Africa's security is at risk. The SANDF's future depends on reversing this chronic neglect. The SANDF's equipment is a museum of aging, unreliable hardware. The Army's Oliphant tanks and Ratel vehicles are obsolete. Replacement projects are stalled by delays and corruption. The Army struggles to deploy even small forces, a critical failure for any military. The Air Force's Gripens and Hawks are mostly grounded, and the transport fleet relies on ancient C-130S. The Royvalk attack helicopter fleet is small and poorly supported. The Navy's advanced frigates and submarines are often non-operational, leaving maritime borders vulnerable. Equipment problems cripple training. Pilots can't fly, sailors can't go to sea, soldiers train with outdated gear. Poor training leads to accidents and further equipment damage, straining limited resources. Low morale drives experienced personnel to leave, worsening the skills shortage. The SANDF's men and women are let down by a system that fails to provide the tools and support they need. This hollowing out is the most dangerous threat to the force's future. Without urgent reform, the SANDF risks total irrelevance. In the early 1990s, the SANDF was the dominant power in sub-Saharan Africa. Today that dominance is gone. Advanced platforms exist on paper, but most are inoperable. Angola and Botswana have modernized and professionalized their militaries, while South Africa's capabilities have eroded. Angola's army is well-equipped and battle-hardened. Botswana's force is small but disciplined. Other regional players, like Nigeria and Ethiopia, have large, active militaries with recent combat experience. The SANDF's technological edge is meaningless if its equipment can't be used. Operational readiness and sustainability now matter more than hardware. Even smaller, less advanced militaries could challenge the SANDF in a direct confrontation. South Africa's declining military power is shifting regional perceptions and influence. The SANDF's inability to deploy and sustain forces undermines its credibility. The risk: South Africa's diplomatic and security influence is fading fast. The SANDF's decline poses real risks first: the inability to secure South Africa's long, porous borders. A weakened force can't counter cross-border crime, smuggling, or illegal immigration, threatening internal stability. Peacekeeping missions, once a source of regional influence, are now at risk as the SANDF's capabilities wane. The 2013 Battle of Bangui exposed the dangers of deploying under-equipped troops. At home, a weak military leaves South Africa vulnerable to unrest and unable to guarantee constitutional order. The SANDF is the ultimate backstop in times of crisis. A hollowed-out force may fail when needed most. Strategic irrelevance looms: an expensive organization providing little real security. Investments in advanced equipment will be wasted and institutional knowledge lost. Rebuilding from such a low point would be costly and difficult. South Africa is on the brink of losing a vital national asset. The risks are immediate, and long-term security, influence, and sovereignty are all at stake. The time to act is now. Reversing the SANDF's decline demands political will and a shift in national priorities. Defense must be funded at sustainable levels, around 1.5% of GDP, to restore core capabilities. A new defense review should define a realistic, affordable force design focused on South Africa's actual needs. Downsizing may be necessary, retiring expensive, hard-to-maintain equipment in favor of a smaller, agile force. Prioritize border security, maritime patrol, peacekeeping, and internal stability. Invest in light infantry, modern vehicles, transport aircraft, and patrol vessels. The SANDF must become an employer of choice. Improve pay, career paths, and root out corruption. Massive investment in training is essential. Technical skills must be rebuilt. Rebuilding human capital is as important as new hardware. The SANDF must be seen as a professional, accountable institution serving all South Africans. Revitalize the domestic defense industry to support the force and create jobs. Restoration will be long and difficult, but not impossible. A capable defense force is an essential pillar of a sovereign, secure state.